Happy Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome into Morning Jocks. Conrad Van Order and Damian Mitchell back with us after taking a little vacation here in the early part of the week. So good to have Damian back after a couple of days. And the good thing is, Damian, you didn't miss anything. Nothing big happened in the world of college football while you were gone.
Oh, really, man? I swung by Baton Rouge, and they said that there was a job opening down there that it was a little bit earlier than expected.
You hand off an application and
Yeah, but they
said they hear from them
they
soon?
immediately said, "Nah, we're good this way."
Okay.
They were looking at other places. It actually got political, believe it or not. And I was like, "Oh, okay. I didn't know this was part of the process." But nonetheless, man, Baton Rouge is just a little bit of a detour from the beach, but it's no big deal.
Yeah, just a little bit. So good to have Damian back, and we'll get into a little bit of the Brian Kelly stuff and hear some of your thoughts, Damian, as well as the governor of Louisiana's thoughts, because that's gonna be a fun conversation. We'll have that here coming up in just a little bit. But of course, it's Thursday, so got to get things rolling here towards the next weekend of college football action. As you had a little bit going on last night, but of course, the game we're all looking forward to this weekend is going to be Kentucky as they head down to the Plains to take on the Auburn Tigers, and Auburn tries to get back-to-back SEC wins to kind of get a little momentum here, potentially get something rolling in the back half of the season here. As after this one, you do have Mercer still, but you got Vanderbilt and Alabama. Those are going to be your two SEC games left, and obviously winning either of those games or both of them would be massive for Hugh Freeze and for the program, just based on how rough the season's been at times so far this year. But before you can get to those opportunities, you got to get past this game against Kentucky. And you want to do that as healthy as possible. So let's start off with the availability reports for the Auburn Tigers, because there are some names on here that you're going to notice and maybe be a little concerned about. So there's 4 guys listed as questionable. So you've got Connor Gibbs. They're one of the kickers. He's listed as questionable. Jordan Crawford, one of those young defensive linemen that came from Parker actually last year. But he's on the questionable chart right now. And then 2 wide receivers on there as well. Of course, Cam Coleman. We know Cam Coleman. He got injured last week against Arkansas, had that great catch early on, that first touchdown for Auburn. He was able to come back into that game a little bit against Arkansas, but clearly he wasn't 100% when he did so. But he's listed as questionable, but we did hear from Hugh Freeze yesterday where he told us that he's not a full participant at practice yet, but Hugh Freeze said he is optimistic that Cam Coleman would be able to go this Saturday against Kentucky. So we'll just kind of see how that develops over the next 48 hours or so. But worth keeping an eye on. And then you also have Malcolm Simmons there at the wide receiver spot, also listed as questionable. So, certainly not what you want going into a game like this if you're down 2 of your top 3 receivers in Simmons and Coleman. But that's what the injury report tells you right now. So we'll see how those guys progress here over the next couple of days for the Auburn Tigers. On the Kentucky side of things, a little more dinged up than the Auburn Tigers are. The good news from them is running back Seth McGowan, who's been really nice for them this year. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry. He's listed as probable, so he should be able to go this weekend against Auburn. Then you've got linebacker Landon Watson and wide receiver Jamori Macklin. They're both listed as questionable for Kentucky. And then they have an offensive lineman as well as a couple of DBs there on the doubtful section of the report. So Kentucky a little more banged up than Auburn maybe, but certainly worth keeping an eye on Auburn for Malcolm Simmons and Cam Coleman specifically to see if they are able to suit up on Saturday for the Kentucky Wildcats. All right, that's your injury report. And speaking of injuries, actually, before we continue on with the Auburn Tigers, one that you do need to keep an eye on this weekend, we know one of the bigger games, it's still funny to say it, but Texas and Vanderbilt, and Arch Manning, he had a concussion last week. He is questionable right now. That's what he was on the Texas injury report last night. But we know that he's going through concussion protocol. So that's one of the bigger games of the weekend. I know some people out there are, still have it's Vanderbilt. There's, you're still not buying into the Vanderbilt thing, which is fine if that's the case. But, if you're maybe thinking of sprinkling a couple shekels on Texas, probably good to know that Arch Manning may not play.
It makes a difference.
Because, again, he hasn't been as advertised before the season, but I think we all agree that Texas is better when he is under center than rolling with the backup, even though he did throw a nice touchdown in overtime last week against Mississippi State. But that is kind of the big injury news in the SEC, though, is that Arch Manning is going to be questionable for that game. So if you're Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt, this really feels like a big opportunity to continue that march on towards a college football playoff appearance. But let's get back to Alabama and Auburn. What's going on with those programs? Because yesterday we did get to hear a little bit from both of them as far as the SEC teleconference goes. So we'll start with Auburn, and I already told you about Cam Coleman and what Hugh Freeze had to say there, that he's optimistic that he will be able to go on Saturday, even though he's on the injury report from last night. But how about the quarterbacks? Because we know that's going to be a big topic, of course. It kind of got overshadowed. We talked about that a little bit on Monday, Damian. It was just kind of weird, coming after the game because, Alex McPherson was the hero. You had Rayshon Pleasant with a pick six. And I mean, when you get 4 turnovers in the fourth quarter, that's kind of the story of the game. And so Ashton Daniels starting the second half kind of got overlooked, I feel like. And so now maybe more of a focal point. But this is Hugh Freeze yesterday talking about how the quarterbacks, Ashton Daniels and Jackson Arnold, how they've looked in practice, splitting reps, and just kind of an update on that situation. So there you go. There's the latest on the quarterback situation for the Auburn Tigers. Um, Again, we'll see who starts, who takes the first snaps there under center for Auburn on Saturday. I said it early in the week. I maintained the idea. Look, you didn't finish a lot of drives with touchdowns the way that you needed to, and I understand that Jackson has looked pretty good in those first drives that are scripted the last few weeks, but I don't know. I feel like at this point I'd give Ashton Daniels probably the nod to start. He was able to lead you to a comeback in the second half. I know a lot of it had to do with the defense, but there were a lot of field goals in that, and somebody's got to put you in a good position to kick those. So I think I would probably continue to roll it on with Ashton Daniels, give him an opportunity, see what he can do after a week of, preparing more so like he's going to be the starter, and see what you have there. I don't know if you agree with that, Damian, disagree on that, because I know you haven't really gotten to talk a lot about the Auburn quarterback situation.
Yeah, you've already made your point that Jackson was already on the short leash. It's kind of done now. Like it's more difficult to reel it back in and play confidently when you know that you're on a pitch count, essentially.
Well, what happens if you start the game, you throw an interception, then you get benched again?
Right. So at this point, you kind of know what you expect. Now the jury's out on on Jackson Arnold. He is exactly what we thought he was. We kind of looked at it at Oklahoma, the situation how it was, because the pieces around him weren't necessarily healthy or there, and then it never got better at Auburn. And now it's all right. Ashton Daniels goes in. Yeah, he's playing loose because honestly, he probably didn't think he was going to get in this situation, but he prepared like he was, and he looked pretty good while he was out there. So now it's okay, Jackson. We know what to expect from you. Ashton, this is your opportunity. What you gonna do with it? And I think what we saw in the second half for him, didn't put the ball in harm's way, did things with his legs, did things with his arms, kind of played within the system, and now it's kind of okay. If this is what we're gonna get, might as well roll with him. So I think that Ashton Daniels should start. I think that in the event that Jackson Arnold is not where he needs to be mentally anymore, because now it's happened at two places.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even want to run the risk. It's, hey, we're rolling with Ashton. Let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, it feels like that would be, again, that's the way that I would go as well, but we'll see what Hugh Freeze and that staff decide to do on Saturday. So we'll break that game down a little more in depth for you coming up here around 6:30, a little bit later on in the program. But quickly, let's get to Alabama. They're on bye week, so not a whole lot going on in Tuscaloosa, but a couple of things worth passing on. So again, during the teleconference yesterday, got an update on some injury stuff for the Crimson Tide, because you don't get an availability report because they're not playing a game. But the good news is Kalen DeBoer said yesterday that he expects both Isaiah Horton and Latsier Brooks to be back and be healthy enough to go against LSU next weekend. So that's certainly good. Alabama seemed to miss them against South Carolina because Horton, he got in there a little bit early, but he got banged up pretty quick, and Latsier Brooks was held out of that game. So that's good. And then another kind of a surprise a little bit on the injury front was Kalen DeBoer talking about Quay Russaw, who had foot surgery going back, I guess, a little over a month ago now, and how he's maybe a little ahead of schedule in his recovery. And that's somebody that, again, I don't want to nothing is definite, obviously, but I think maybe there's a little bit of optimism that if you find yourself in a college football playoff and maybe you make a little bit of a run there, that Quay Russaw is a guy that could potentially be a factor for this defense late in the season if they're able to go on a run here and make it to the college football playoff and maybe make a little bit of a deep run there. So that's good news if you are an Alabama fan. Then you had Hey Coach last night as well, Kalen DeBoer, talking about, so they had given the guys a few days off after the South Carolina game, back on the practice field for the first time yesterday. And all he had to say was, quote from Kalen DeBoer, "We're working hard. The guys had a great practice today. I really like the efficiency, but also the intensity about it. We have a lot of scouts that come out here and note how hard the guys continue to practice." So that's certainly a good sign of things there from the Alabama front. So that's kind of your update, what's going on the Plains as well as down in Tuscaloosa, as Alabama on bye week and Auburn, a big one coming up against Kentucky. But we talked about at the end of the show, or at the beginning of the show, excuse me, Damien's been out, so he hasn't gotten to join in on some of the Brian Kelly fun. And there was more of it yesterday because the governor of Louisiana, him and Scott Woodward are not friends. Well, maybe they were. They're certainly not now, because he had some very interesting comments, we will just say, about the LSU athletic director and how they are going to handle this next coaching search down on the Bayou. We'll let you hear straight from the Louisiana governor next here on Morning Jocks. 6:17 here on your Thursday morning, a chilly one at that. Make sure you bundle up if you're headed out this morning to work, school, wherever it is that you may be headed on this Thursday. Appreciate you making us a part of your morning each and every day right here on Jocks. So, Conrad Van Order, Damian Mitchell back with us as we continue the conversation with LSU, Brian Kelly, and what all is going on there. But first off, quickly, we did have a little bit of action going on last night. Have to give a shout out to our home state team, the Jacksonville State Gamecocks, as they got a victory last night over Middle Tennessee, 24-21. So a nice win there for the Gamecocks as Cam Cook had another nice night, 21 carries, 105 yards, and a touchdown as JSU was able to come back, scored 17 points in the fourth quarter to come back and take down Middle Tennessee, who had been up a touchdown going into the final frame there. So JSU, they're now 5-3 on the year, undefeated in Conference USA play. So congratulations to them. And then you also had Missouri State taking down FIU last night, 28-21 in that matchup. So Missouri State, they're 5-3 as well. They're a 3-1 though in Conference USA right there behind Jacksonville State. And of course, you did have Game 5 of the World Series last night as the Blue Jays have taken a 3-2 series lead now over the Dodgers. They get it 6-1 last night. Blue Jays, honestly, they could have stopped playing. They could have just put the bats down after their first two hitters, and they would have won the game because they went back-to-back home runs to open it up last night in the top of the first, and they won 6-1. So that was it. They only needed 2 runs. They got them from the first 2 at bats. And that was all she wrote. So now that's going to go back to Toronto and the Rogers Center tomorrow night. Game 6 will be on Halloween. Remember, tomorrow is Halloween. And then a decisive Game 7 would be on Saturday. So shout out to the Blue Jays as they try to capture the World Series title. But let's get to Brian Kelly, all that fun stuff going down on the Bayou. So quickly, we're going to let you hear in a second. We'll let you hear from the governor of Louisiana. And I promise, if you have not heard this, this is going to make your day. This is going to be probably the funniest thing you hear maybe all week. So we'll get to that in just a second. But Damien hasn't been here. He's been on vacation the last couple of days. So quickly, what your immediate reaction, you're hanging out, you're at the beach having a good time, and then boom, you see your phone, Brian Kelly's been fired by LSU. What was your initial reaction? How surprised were you after the Texas A&M game that happened as quickly as it did?
I wasn't surprised because when I was watching the A&M and LSU game, it kind of felt as the score was getting bigger and bigger. I was like, "Ooh, this ain't the prettiest of looks." And the first conversation I had with my girl at the time, and like she knows ball, but like she's not in depth like we are. And she was just like, "I've heard that the coach is kind of on the hot seat," and she's like, "I think he might be done after this." And I was just like, "Yeah, I don't know how you can really work yourself through this one, man. Like, had they lost on a game-winning field goal, maybe you'd have the conversation of just, we'll let him finish out the season. But it didn't necessarily feel or trend that, like, he was going to be there that long. But then kind of hearing everything of how he kind of operated while he was at LSU, it's, they were, at any point, was anybody really rocking with him to begin with? Like, was it ever... Were they just trying to just keep this under wraps, and as long as they were winning, all right, we'll allow some things to kind of go away, go around, go on. But it seemed quick, but also not surprising because of just the magnitude of what the job is.
Yeah, I think if you haven't heard the story, we were talking about it on Three Man Front yesterday, but again, according to people that were there at the game on Saturday night in the press box covering the game for LSU and Texas A&M, you literally had the governor of Louisiana going around a press box asking people, "Do I have your support to get rid of Brian Kelly?" Like, it had gotten to that point in the middle of the game, in the second half, obviously, when things went south pretty quickly. That's something that you just don't really hear a lot about that. But so anyways, after Saturday, then, Sunday, the rumblings start to come out. Apparently there are these hours and hours of meetings on Sunday at the governor's mansion where you have the board of trustees, you have the governor. They're involved. They're having discussions on what to do. But somebody that wasn't seemingly involved, from what we understand, was Scott Woodward, who is the athletics director there at LSU. And as we noted, yes, he is the same guy that hired Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. Now, this has been thrown out there. He is not the guy that gave Jimbo Fisher the extension that ultimately led to the buyout. But he is the guy that hired Jimbo Fisher initially at Texas A&M. And of course, yes, he is the guy that hired Brian Kelly and gave him that contract here at LSU. So Scott Woodward, let's just say people not happy with him down in Baton Rouge right now. So this is audio yesterday. Jeff Landry, the Louisiana governor, this is him talking about how this coaching search is going to work. And one guy, Scott Woodward, who is absolutely not going to be hiring the next LSU head coach. I love that. I don't know who it's going to be. We're going to come up with the search committee, but it's not. I'll tell you who it's not going to be, and it's not going to be Scott Woodward. So he had a few other things to say that you may have seen on social. He had some things to say about Jimmy Sexton. Granted, I don't think he has as in-depth of an understanding of these things as he comes out to say that he does, because Brian Kelly and Jimbo didn't have the same. There's just things that he's saying where he's trying to insinuate that Jimmy Sexton is kind of controlling all of this. And we understand that Jimmy Sexton is very powerful and with his clients and things like that. But Jimmy Sexton doesn't represent all of the parties that he's talking about. And it got a little off the rails at times there. But you can tell, obviously, he is motivated to find a new head coach, and he believes that they are going to find one. But he's tired of rewarding failure, and he's tired of this pattern now of Scott Woodward going out and hiring coaches that are failures.
Yeah. Just imagine if you're Scott Woodward, you know, going about your day, and all of a sudden, boom, you become public enemy number one.
It doesn't feel like he's going to have a job for that long.
Right.
If we're being honest here. I mean, he hired Kim Mulkey. That was good.
Yeah.
That's been a good move.
It has.
I thought Brian Kelly hire at the time was a good hire.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't turn out that way. Yeah, that's all I got. So
that's his resume.
Yes. So clearly things little heated down there in the bayou right now as they try to figure out what direction they want to go. But yeah, if you're Scott Woodward, you probably didn't love hearing all of that yesterday as the governor of your state just pretty much blasted you during a live press conference on multiple occasions. But so be it. I guess that's what comes with being the AD at a school like LSU and having a football program that's not living up to the expectations of your history.
Yeah. I guess the biggest question is, where does Brian Kelly go from here?
That's a good question. And we talked about it a little bit earlier in the week, but if you missed it, so there's a clause in his contract with LSU where he has to try to get another job, right? Because if he goes and gets another job, it kind of mitigates the buyout, takes some of the money off of LSU's burden. So he, I guess, is encouraged to go and do his due diligence and apply for job openings or listen to offers. But I will say this, if I was him, I would probably go through a lot of interviews and not take any jobs because you agreed to this contract with me. I'm sorry you have buyer's remorse, but you offered it to me. I signed it. You signed it. You're kind of on the hook for that. That's my approach.
Squeeze
right?
every penny that you can.
Yeah, they signed the contract.
Exactly.
It might be a stupid contract, but that's on them for offering you a stupid contract.
Mm-hmm.
I would take everything that I was owed. So we'll see how that kind of progresses there. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe Penn State. Maybe that's somewhere that he can go. And I don't know.
Hell
I don't know.
yeah. I mean,
I mean, out of the options, like
right. You know,
I
it
don't think
doesn't sound
Florida's gonna
bad.
call.
No, no,
I mean,
no. They have their eyes on one person.
yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's going to be an interesting next couple of weeks, and obviously, with like the lane stuff, right? I mean, as long as Ole Miss keeps winning, they're going to kick the can. I mean, if you're going to a playoff, like it's going to be a while before you can have these things kind of figured out. So there's a lot left to do there, but that was fun yesterday. Getting to hear the Louisiana governor, maybe Donald Trump hiring the next coach for LSU because it's certainly not going to be one Scott Woodward. But we do have to take a deep dive now. We like to do this on Thursdays. So Alabama on bye week, which means we get to solely focus on the Auburn Tigers as they're going to host Kentucky. What are the keys to victory for the Tigers? How can Hugh Freeze get that second straight SEC win? We'll break it all down for you next, right here on Jocks. Welcome back into Morning Jocks. Conrad Van Order, Damian Mitchell with you here as we roll along with the college football conversation. So quickly before we move past the LSU thing, Jamie on the courtesy GMC text line 205-834-9450. He chimed in over the break, and I'm glad he reminded me of this. But yes, Ed Orgeron, if you saw it, did an interview yesterday where he said that he would be essentially said he would love to come back to LSU and be the head coach again. So,
Of course.
Of course. Just if you thought the situation couldn't get any funnier, yes, Ed Orgeron did yesterday say that he would be interested in maybe making a return there to Baton Rouge. Something tells me they are not going to be interested in him returning to Baton Rouge, at least as a head coach. So, but yeah, I did certainly got a kick out of that yesterday as when he said that. But we're going to move on to the Auburn and Kentucky game. Going to give you a little bit of a deep dive into this matchup because, again, it is the big one here in the state over the weekend with Alabama being on bye and Auburn looking to get over 500, get to 2-4 in SEC play, back-to-back SEC wins. And, again, I understand it's not – I'm not saying this is the most likely scenario, but – again, if you win this game, you're going to be one step closer to a bowl game. You get this one in Mercer, that's 6 wins. You're right there. And then if you can pull off a win over Vanderbilt or Alabama, that can just kind of be the cherry on top of a second half of a season that maybe could look a little better than we were all thinking 2 weeks ago. I'll just leave it at that. So let's dive into this matchup going into it. So Auburn right now is an 11.5-point favorite. So that line's actually gone up a little bit now for the Auburn Tigers, which, yeah, I mean, that scares me too. I'll be honest. Like
seems a little thick.
I get it's at home. Kentucky's bad. Like Auburn is a better team than Kentucky, but still a lot of points for an offense that we've only seen score more than 20 points in SEC play once.
Against the worst defense in the SEC.
It was against the worst defense in the SEC, and I mean, I know they scored 33, but one of them came off a pick six, and
there were a lot of field goals, and
yes,
yeah, I'm right there with you, brother.
And while Kentucky defensively is not, they're not Ohio State or anything like that, they're better than Arkansas was, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're going to put up a little more of a fight, particularly when it comes to the run defense. So let's dive into this one here quickly for you. And speaking of that Kentucky defense. So they're giving up right now a little over 30 points a game in SEC play. So that's the third most of any team in the conference, which, yes, Arkansas is behind them in that category. But they're also allowing the third most total yards per game at 384. So, again, if you're Auburn, that gives you some hope that, right, maybe you can get some things rolling for an entire game, offensively speaking at least. And as I just touched on, the best part of Kentucky's defense, though, is certainly their run defense. They're ninth in the SEC in run defense, actually. They're only giving up 130 yards per game there. So that might be a little more difficult of things. As we know, Auburn, not a great passing team, but a very solid running team, especially when they double down on it. They're very good at running the football. And so I would expect that to be the strategy going in, and it's just going to be a question of, can you overpower Kentucky's run defense? Another thing that and this is flying under the radar and look, I'm not blaming anybody for it. It's Kentucky. But if you pay attention to Cutter Boley, their quarterback, like he's the best quarterback they've had in a while. I will say that. And I know that's a very low bar that we're comparing him to there. But in their last 3 games, so Kentucky's last 3 games, they played Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee. Kentucky, now they're only averaging right at 20 points a game. So that's not great. But when you look at what Cutter Boley's done, in those 3 games, he's averaging 271 passing yards per game, completing 71% of his passes. He has 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and he also had a rushing touchdown too. So 8 total touchdowns, 3 interceptions, completing over 70% of his passes. That's, I mean, again, I know it's a low bar from what they've had in the past, but you actually have a semblance of a quarterback there in Kentucky, and that's something that Auburn is going to have to contend with. I will say this, though, for the Auburn defense. If you're an Auburn fan, this is probably going to be your new favorite stat if you haven't heard it. This is incredible. All right, so Auburn's played 8 games this year. How many of those games do you think they've held their opponents to under their scoring average for the season? Out of 8 games.
Out of 8? I'm going to say all 8.
It would be all 8. How many of those have they held their opponent to 10 points or more under their scoring average?
I'm going to say 6 out of 8.
7.
7 out of 8.
Oklahoma is the only one. I think it was like 4 points under their average.
Okay.
But, so think about that, though. But we talk about this defense. Every game they have played this year, the offense, essentially the opponent that they're facing is having a worse than average performance every single week against this Auburn defense. And in 7 of their 8 games, they have held opponents to at least 10 points under their scoring average. That's remarkable. All that to say, Kentucky averages 24 points a game.
Oh, boy.
So if we're going based on this trend, which I would say 8 out of 8 is a trend at this point, can you just score 24 points if you're Auburn? Because you're going to win the football game.
Yeah, that's exactly what they scored last year, too. 24 points against
do it again. You're going to win.
Kentucky. And this game, coming into it, you know, you feel confident, and I figured this was going to happen. One, Arkansas defense is terrible.
Yeah, it's awful.
It's not good. And yet, when it comes to the passing game, you were still hovering around 150 yards. Now, running the ball was fantastic.
Some of those holes that Jeremiah Cobb had were
he was cooking.
Massive.
He was cooking.
Grand Canyons out there.
And this was also the game last year where Jarquez Hunter ran for almost 300 yards on him. So I look at this game of if you are going to look at 2 weeks of this is a get-right situation for Auburn, these are the 2 weeks that you need to at least see that for as close as Hugh Freeze says that Auburn is, this should be the one. This game should be the one that, you know what, I'm just going to start calling plays. By God, this has to work. Because, again, last week, Joey Aguilar had the best game of his life. The man almost threw for 400 yards against Kentucky. It doesn't matter if Jackson Arnold is a head case or if Ashton Daniels is just coming in for relief. You should be able to pick this defense apart. And defensively, keep playing how you've been playing. Simple as that. Like, I don't know. This may be the most simple game plan that you have. If Kentucky wants to make this a fist fight, so be it. Because your offense is a tad bit more consistent. Now, is it, is it head and shoulders above Kentucky? No. Statistically, no. But what you have offensively compared to what they are starting or trying to put together, you have a little bit more confidence because your defense is saying, you know what, we got y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all do whatever y'all need to do to figure things out because defensively, it don't matter what they throw at us. We're going to make the plays that you need to. So this may be one of the more uglier games, or it could be Auburn blowing them out by, 2 or more touchdowns. But I think if you're going to have a situation where your offense is going to look as efficient as it has been, this is probably the closest game you're going to get to what you saw week 1 against Baylor, where they can pick exactly what they want to do, line up, and go do it. Because, again, Jeremiah Cobb now has shown, give me the rock. I got you. And then the passing game, eventually it has to work out. Now, we're 9-10 games in. You kind of are what you are. This is kind of, it is what it is, par for the course. But if you are going to have a get-right situation, these are the 2 weeks of, okay, if you're going to regain any sort of confidence for the backstretch, put it on tape on Saturday.
I'm right there with you. And again, we mentioned it if you missed it early on in the show, but when you have Cam Coleman and Malcolm Simmons both questionable as well, probably leans a little more into going to have to run that thing. But, you come back to the Arkansas game, Auburn had 50 carries in that game. 50. Now, some of those are like quarterback scrambles and things like that, right? But when you look at, just between, so Omar and Jeremiah Cobb, those are the 2 running backs. They had 31 carries between them. You had 13 from the quarterbacks, and then Eric Singleton had 4. So, you've got, again, that's 50 carries. That's a lot of rushing attempts in a game, and I think, again, like you're saying, if you're Auburn, probably want to continue to do that. And especially the great thing is, right, whatever quarterback's in there, they both can use their legs, right? And so it's not like you're going to have to kind of change that part of the game plan necessarily depending on, do you start with Jackson? Do you start with Ashton Daniels? What does that look like? So, but yeah, if you're Auburn, you're the better team. You should win this game. Now, do they win the game and cover? That's a different question, but you should win this game. If you don't win this game, I,
Yeah, yeah, I know it, Conrad.
I
You ain't
mean,
got to say it.
it probably is time. Just like when Auburn beats Kentucky on Saturday, because they should, and I'm very confident that they will. You might get some news out of Lexington in a couple of days, right? So this is just one of those games where,
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking to somebody from KSR yesterday on 3-man front, and it was the it's the loser go home bowl essentially is what it is. Like, I mean, Kentucky's done. Like they're done with they're tired of this guy.
I know it.
They're tired of him. And the good news for them is basketball starts next week, so they can kind of forget about it. But
Here's another thing for Kentucky. Say you sell out to stop the run. What do you have more confidence in as far as if, say, Kentucky does neutralize the run game for Auburn? Do you have more confidence of them making a stop in the secondary or Auburn's wideouts and quarterbacks finally getting on page?
If Cam Coleman and Malcolm Simmons are out there, then I will probably roll the dice with Auburn, and you're going to hit on those eventually.
Right. And that's kind of how I am with this. Like, I go back and forth of, okay, Auburn's the better football team. No matter how sloppy it has looked up until this point, defensively, they can hang their hat of, we will keep you under 14 points. We will do that. That is what we can do. That's a given. It's just offensively, man, even in the Arkansas win, you're not finishing drives. And I think that's the frustrating part of, man, this is the worst defense in the SEC, and you still can't find yourself in the end zone. Now, you're still getting points, but there were so many more points that you left out there. So it's, okay, maybe they hit on those this weekend. They're at home, luxury of Jordan Hare, you've got it. But it still feels as though, man, am I holding on to a false sense of optimism, or are we just going to get the game that we all expect of? Auburn's going to get right. But it's the tug of war of, if I haven't seen it yet, what makes me believe it's going to happen Saturday?
Well, and I think that's the one bad thing about the Arkansas game is it was a good win to have. The way the defense played was spectacular. Alex McPherson was spectacular, but I don't think anybody really walked away from that game and felt better about the offense. You're just glad that the defense and special teams came through and won you that football game, and Taylon Green decided to be, the worst quarterback on planet Earth for 15 minutes. Like, I mean, he threw 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter. Credit to the defense for making the plays, but I don't think that's going to happen again this week. I could be wrong, but that doesn't happen very often. So, certainly an opportunity for people to get a little bit of faith in this Auburn offense and Hugh Freeze as they await Vanderbilt and Alabama in the final stretch of the season. But we see you on the courtesy GMC text line as well as phone lines 205-834-9450. A lot of you want to weigh in on this Auburn-Kentucky game coming up over the weekend, and that is where we will go. We hand it off to you next here on Jocks. Welcome back into Morning Jocks here on your Thursday morning. As we turn the conversation over to you, spent a lot of time today talking about Auburn and Kentucky. Is that game coming up on Saturday? And of course, we will have our picks for you tomorrow, as we will make our picks for the biggest college football games of the weekend, as we do each and every Friday. And it'll also be a Final Score Friday. So best day of the week. We always look forward to those Friday shows, and we look forward to it tomorrow yet again. So let's head to the courtesy GMC text line here before we hand you off to McElroy and Kubelik in the morning. 205-834-9450. Let's see. Lewis chimes in and says, so if it's loser go home with a check, how hard are Stoops and Freeze coaching this weekend?
That's a fair point.
Not a bad question there. Again, I mean, if I was in that situation, I might say, good game, coach. You enjoy your victory. I'm sorry. If I'm at a job and I know that I am on the thinnest of ice, and on one side of it is continuing to have to slog through a horrible season, or B, be paid millions of dollars to go sit my ass on the couch. I mean, is that really even...
Is that right? Is it really a decision?
Just saying. Just saying. All right, see, this person asks, is Jackson Arnold starting or the other guy for Auburn? Hugh Freeze says that he's not sure yet. He said it's a difficult decision because it's been a close competition all week, and he's playing the cards close to the best.
And also, that pick six was bad.
Oh, it was awful. It looked like Peyton Thorne. Very reminiscent.
It was bad. One, also two, if all parties involved, it was atrocious.
My question is, you've been running the ball down their throat. Why, when you get in the red zone in that situation, are we throwing a little out route to
the far side of the field?
Yeah.
DB is just, oh, okay, I'll take this. And untouched.
Looked like a couple of interceptions in the Oklahoma-Alabama game last year. But yeah, that was just bad on all fronts.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
Yeah. Just bad on all fronts there. Let's see. If Hugh Freeze loses these next games, this is Joseph. If Hugh Freeze loses these next two games does he get fired before the bye week like we saw Brian Kelly and Billy Napier? I think, I'll be honest with you, if he loses to Kentucky this weekend at home, I think that's it. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
They're the worst team in the conference. You got to beat them. You got to beat them at home. Don, he says, good morning, guys. With Daniels now playing and Cobb running the ball, it feels different offensively. I'm hearing they have some new wrinkles. Auburn's going to win by 2 touchdowns and force 3 turnovers.
Wrinkles. This is week 10, dog.
I'm just glad because was it 2 weeks ago that Don couldn't even stomach giving a prediction for the Auburn game, and now they're going to win by multiple scores, get 3 turnovers, and I'm just glad that he's feeling better about things. Anthony, an optimistic Auburn fan, he says, I fully expect Hugh Freeze to start Jackson Arnold and then ignore the run game. It's possible. Eric from Cahaba Heights, he chimes in. He says, with so many coaching vacancies popping up in Auburn's recent success, I think it's time to lock in our coach for the future. Let's give Hugh Freeze that extension.
Stop.
If he, never mind. I'm just saying maybe if he won a game at the end of the year, you get that Gus Malzahn extension, you know,
you had us in the first half.
The old beat Alabama, get a contract extension special there. Let's see. This says somebody's reporting that Ashton Daniels has been taking the majority of the reps with the ones this week at practice. I'm just going off of what the head ball coach said. And Hugh Freeze says that it is still up in the air right now, but we will, again, me and Damian both said we would start Ashton Daniels. I would be a little surprised if he doesn't get the nod just because, again, he did lead you to a comeback last week, but nothing would surprise me at this point. Let's see. Jordan from Warrior says, Brian Kelly was on the hot seat the moment he opened his mouth with that fake Southern accent. That didn't help.
Looking back on it, wasn't the best start.
Drake, our resident Florida fan, says, Lane's either staying at Ole Miss or taking the Florida job. I don't see him taking the LSU job.
He's staying at Ole Miss.
I think he's staying at Ole Miss as well. Paul chimes in. He says, morning, gentlemen. Slop City game. Auburn should never be double-digit faves against anybody. Take the Cats to cover. All right. And Rusty says, it's good to have you back, Damian. We missed you this week. We certainly did. We're back tomorrow at 6 a.m. McElroy and Kublik in the morning. Those guys are next.